He never raised his voice. He never celebrated on the podium. He never picked a fight with the press. And yet, for over 2 decades, the bravest men in road racing quietly agreed on one thing. The moment Joey Dunlop pulled his helmet on, the race was already half over. 26 Isle of Man TT wins. 5 consecutive Formula One TT World titles. 24 Northwest 200 victories. And 1 final hat trick at the TT, at the age of 48. But here is the part almost nobody talks about. Joey Dunlop never tried to intimidate anyone. No mind games, no trash talk, no showboating. So how did a quiet farmer from Ballymoney become the man that legends of this sport, 25 years after his death, still describe with something that sounds a lot like fear? To understand that, you do not ask the fans. You ask the men who lined up beside him on the grid, and the men who came after, chasing a ghost he left behind. Mick Grant was not a man who spoke lightly. He had 7 Isle of Man TT wins of his own. He was a factory Suzuki rider at the peak of British road racing. And in every honest interview Grant gave in the years after Joey retired, he described racing Joey Dunlop the same way. Like waiting for a mistake that never came. Formula One TT, 1985. The Snaefell Mountain Course. 60 kilometers of public road, more than 200 corners, stone walls where safety barriers should be. Grant was on the factory Suzuki XR69. Joey was on a Honda RS850R, prepared by Rothman's Honda Britain. By the 4th lap, Joey's drive chain had a serious problem. His team called him into the pits. He refused. Joey finished the remaining laps and won the race. It was his 4th consecutive Formula One TT World title, part of a run of 5 straight championships from 1982 to 1986. That record has never been broken. In the 1983 documentary V4 Victory, David Wood filmed Joey in a way almost nobody else had. No interviews, just observation. A Honda engineer in the film described Joey as a rider who could feel the engine in a way no telemetry equipment could measure. That was what frightened Grant. Not that Joey was faster, but that Joey refused to give him the one thing every rival needed: the mistake. It did not come in the dry. It did not come in the wet. It did not come even when Joey's bike was falling apart underneath him. But there was a weather condition that turned Joey from hard to beat into something else entirely. Something a former British Grand Prix rider spent decades trying to explain, and never quite could. Ulster Grand Prix, 1993. The sky opened up mid-race and poured. The entire grid slowed down. Every single one of them, except one. Joey Dunlop, 41 years old, twisted the throttle harder. He took the win in conditions his rivals would later describe as almost undrivable. Steve Parrish was a former Grand Prix rider who went on to commentate the TT for ITV for more than 2 decades. And when Parrish talked about Joey, his voice always dropped a little. He once told a broadcast audience that watching Joey in the wet was like watching a man who could see something on the tarmac the rest of them simply could not see. That was the phrase Parrish came back to, again and again in interviews. Something the rest of them could not see. In the 2014 documentary Road, narrated by Liam Neeson, one of Joey's closest teammates put it even more plainly. He said Joey did not fear the rain because Joey did not think of it as rain. He thought of it as a different racing surface, one he had already learned by heart on the back roads of Antrim. Across his career, Joey won multiple races in wet or mixed conditions at the TT, the Ulster Grand Prix, and the Northwest 200. No road racer of his generation came close to that record in the rain. Parrish said it best. When everyone else was praying for the weather to clear, Joey was hoping it would get worse, and it usually did. But rain was only weather. There was something else Joey did that terrified an entire generation, and it had nothing to do with riding. For 15 years, from 1985 to 2000, the name Joey Dunlop sat at the top of sector timing sheets across the Snaefell Mountain Course. Young riders would open the data on their pit wall boards, look for a target time, and see the same name again and again. Dunlop. Dunlop, Dunlop. Ian Lougher came to the Isle of Man with one simple goal: win a race. In interviews years later, Lougher was completely honest about what it felt like to race in the same era as Joey. He said you were not just competing against the man on the grid, you were competing against a benchmark that had already been set before you even arrived. That feeling was shared by an entire generation. In TT archive interviews, riders from the mid-1990s described the same psychological pressure. They were not racing Joey the man. They were racing the shadow of everything Joey had already done on that course. Junior TT, 1996. Lougher rolled off the start line 30 seconds behind Joey Dunlop. There were no live timing screens on the bike. Only wind, stone walls, and hedge lines flying past at over 200 kilometers per hour. By the middle of the race, Lougher already knew, without needing to look, that he was losing time every single lap to a 44-year-old man in front of him. Lougher would eventually win TT races of his own, several of them, but the bar Joey had set never came down. And that was terrifying in a way nobody wanted to say out loud, because it meant that even when Joey was not racing, he was still winning. But there was something Lougher and every other rider in the paddock noticed, and it was not something Joey did on the bike. It was something he did the moment he took his leathers off. Michael Rutter grew up inside a racing family. His father, Tony Rutter, was a 4-time Formula 2 TT world champion. Michael had seen every kind of champion by the time he reached the paddock. The loud ones, the arrogant ones, the calculating ones. And then he met Joey Dunlop. In interviews given after 2000, Rutter described Joey with a phrase that stuck. He said, Joey was the one rider who never needed to say anything to be the most respected man in the room. That respect had a very specific sound. It was silence. In the TT tribute interviews recorded after Joey's death, Rutter said something even simpler. When Joey walked through the paddock, the conversations around him stopped. Not out of fear, out of respect so deep that nobody wanted to interrupt him. Isle of Man TT paddock, late 1990s. While the factory riders arrived with motorhomes, personal engineers, and PR staff, Joey Dunlop arrived in an old van. He put up his own tent. He worked on his own bikes. He cooked his own meals. The night before the senior TT in 1998, Joey slept in that van, next to the RC45 he had personally set up. By 1998, Joey had already won 23 TT races. He still had no personal PR team. Still no major individual sponsors outside Honda. Rutter understood something young riders took years to learn. When you race a man who treats motor racing as a second job, behind the farm, behind his family, behind things he never talked about publicly, you cannot beat him with your ego, because he is not carrying one. But there was one man who understood Joey better than anyone who ever raced against him. Not because they competed, but because he spent his entire career trying to become him. Isle of Man TT, 2000. Junior TT. Joey Dunlop, 48 years old, wins the race. Formula 1 TT. Joey wins again. Lightweight 250 TT. Joey wins a third time. A hat trick in a single TT week at the age of 48. Nobody had done that since Mike Halewood. On the grid that week was a 28-year-old rider named John McGuinness, who had never won a TT in his life. 23 years later, John McGuinness stands second in the entire history of the Isle of Man TT, with more wins than almost anyone who has ever ridden the mountain course. Only one name stands above his: Joey Dunlop. In more than 100 years of TT racing, nobody else has come close to Joey's total of 26. In interviews given from around 2015 onward, McGuinness kept coming back to the same word to describe Joey: benchmark. He remembers running behind Joey at the Junior TT in 1999. He watched Joey draw a racing line through Lougher at a speed that, even years later, after McGuinness himself had won multiple TTs, he still could not explain in physical terms. And here is what McGuinness has said in his own way, more than once. When Joey Dunlop died in Estonia on July 2, 2000, he did not feel like a rival had been removed from his path. He felt like a responsibility had been handed to him. McGuinness keeps a photograph of Joey in his garage. Before every tee, he looks at it. This is not superstition. This is what a rider does when he knows he cannot replace the man before him. He is only trying to be worthy of riding the same road. So when you ask why Joey Dunlop terrified the legends of this sport, the answer is not on the racetrack. It is in one thing Joey never once said out loud. Here is the twist nobody expects when they start looking into the legend of Joey Dunlop. Joey never tried to scare anyone. He helped his rivals set up their bikes. He lent them tools. He shared his racing line through Bray Hill with anyone who came and asked. And between seasons, he drove a van full of aid supplies to orphanages in Romania and Bosnia, alone. Thousands of kilometers. No press, no cameras, no announcement. And that is exactly what made him more terrifying than anyone else on the grid. Because you could not hate him. You could not find a single reason to believe you deserved to beat him. On July 2, 2000, in a small race in Tallinn, Estonia, the rain started falling. Joey Dunlop was leading. He never made it to the finish line. 25 years later, the men who raced against him still speak about him the same way. Not as a rival they lost to, but as a standard they will never reach. Because the most terrifying racers in history are almost never the loudest. Sometimes, they are the ones who never gave you a single reason to believe you could beat them.